Waihaskahalt Buffy Mills, White Limlim. Thank you for joining. This is part 2 of Title and Rights. Yesterday I posted a video which was part 1 of Title and Rights. Just to give you a brief synopsis of that video, I really focused in on the history and the values that inform my perspective. I talked about, the early work of our early leaders, the work that they did to unify, the work or the risks that they took to gather and organize, and when it was illegal to do so, those kinds of things, that kind of history that informs my view. I also talked about the need for relationship building processes at the nation level with our nation partners, specifically at the Okanagan Nation Alliance table. There are some really important conversations that are happening at that table, and certainly negotiations that are happening at that table. And we need to be present, and we need to continue to assert ourselves at that table and bring our concerns forward. And we have to keep putting our concerns on the table and keep them at the forefront. We cannot afford to walk away from that table, and I'll explain why in a minute. Today, what I wanted to do is just talk about, all the work that's been done in the last 25 years that have really put us in an amazing position. The foundation work that our early leaders engaged in, it has finally come to fruition, and there's some amazing developments that have happened in the last 25 years in case law and precedents and everything that supports our title and rights, which is fantastic. It has been, for example, it's been acknowledged that we are sovereign, and that our sovereignty predates contact, predates colonization, predates the Royal Proclamation. Thanks, Queen, for giving us our rights, but we already had rights. Yay! So that has finally been acknowledged. We were organized societies, and we had governance systems, and we were managing our lands and resources, and all of that has finally been acknowledged. In addition to that, it's also been acknowledged that we have exclusive rights to our lands and resources that go beyond just our practice-based rights, which is hunting and fishing and gathering. It's proprietary in nature, right? It's commercial. Now, that doesn't mean that we get to throw the doors wide open in terms of economic development initiatives, because title is actually communal. And there is an obligation in that definition to ensure that lands are protected for the future use of our future generations. We need to ensure that it's available for their enjoyment, both land and resources. So it doesn't open the doors or throw the doors wide open to massive development opportunities, right? There is an obligation, our obligation, to take care of the next generations, the future generations, if you will. But that also puts us in a really interesting position in terms of being environmental stewards of our lands. Environmental protections that we can put in place and really do the work that we did pre-contact. We took care of our land, took care of each other, took care of our land. That was all part of it, right? Part of our social organization, part of our fabric of who we are. I'm always really curious, and I know that this is going to be before the courts soon, is this idea of moderate living and attached to our practice-based rights. I always find it interesting that the Crown can, on the one hand, give out permits, leases, and grants to corporations who completely environmentally destroy land. And yet, when it comes to our activities, there's this idea of moderate livelihood. So I'm interested to see what happens, because I'm sure it's going to be in front of the courts soon. The Mi'kmaq I believe, are going to take the Crown to task and to determine what moderate livelihood actually means, right? And that stems from what's happening back east with their commercial fisheries projects, and business that they are now majority ownership in, or have majority ownership in. So I'm really interested to see what happens there. But the discrepancy, I just wanted to point that out. I find that really interesting because it still is a throwback to paternalistic kind of management of Indigenous people. So I'm curious about what happens there. So in addition to all of that, it has also been acknowledged that the Crown has a duty and obligation to consult, and that's more than just having conversation. They have to actually demonstrate that they have done everything that they can to consult Indigenous people. It's more than chief and council, it's communities, it's all the stakeholders involved. So there's an obligation to demonstrate that that has been done, okay? It's more than just compensation. There are a lot of activities attached to the consultation process. But in that, it has been determined that we have a right and a role in decision-making when it comes to the Crown making decisions about our lands or lands that impact us, resources that impact us both in social or cultural situations. So the Crown can't just make unilateral decisions anymore because they could be infringing on our right, even when there's an unproven claim. So really exciting time to be an Indigenous person because our rights are finally at a place where we can actually assert ourselves. It's a fantastic place to be. Now I'm going to go back to my statement a little bit earlier about how and why it's important that we continue to sit at that table, the Okanagan Nation Alliance table. In 2008, the province or the BC Supreme Court found in favor of the province when it came to consultation on one case. And interesting, it's an interesting case. It was between a mining company, the province, and the Hatsul Nation, or Hatsul people band. So they were ordered to negotiate, to consult and negotiate, and so the three were supposed to work together. What had happened though is that the band removed themselves from the table, walked away from the table several times. They made monetary demands of the mine, refused to meet unless those monetary requests were met. So those kinds, it was a really difficult process. Obviously, the negotiation process wasn't working. In the end, what ended up happening in that case is that the permit was declined because the mine didn't account for or demonstrate enough care in determining how the effluent materials off the mine would affect sturgeon populations in the water systems around the mine. And that's the only reason why they were denied the permit. It was actually found that in terms of the duty and obligation to consult, that they had met the requirement. Just because the First Nation pulled away from the table, made their demands, and weren't getting what they wanted, didn't mean that they didn't fulfill their obligation to consult, because they showed up, they engaged, they tried, and they re-engaged. They demonstrated on every level that they were consulting in the way that they needed to, but the First Nation decided not to. And so in that case, it was found that that the duty to consult need was met, or the test was met and passed, right? So we can't afford to walk away from tables, because what we're doing is we're forfeiting our right? If we were to ever come back and lay claim and suggest that consultation didn't happen, we could lose, because there's already been case law and precedent set. So we absolutely have to stay engaged. And that was one of the, I guess, the feedback from that case, is that When you're sitting at the table, there needs to be a level of commitment to the process. It takes as long as it takes, but there has to be a level of commitment to the process to move those consultation processes forward, right? And so that's the only reason why I would caution us from moving away from that table, because as long as we're there asserting ourselves and bringing our concerns to the table, there is an obligation for the other side to consider our concerns. If we engage in this activity where we just walk away from tables, or if we're upset with what was said or done and we just say we're not talking anymore, we could be forfeiting our future rights. And so that's why we need to stay at the table. And with that, I am going to finish up this video and say why Lim Lim. Please, if you have any questions, please ask me some questions. Also, just so you know, I have Sunday office hours at 1 p.m. It'd be nice to see you. Yeah, I love your questions, so please keep them coming. Take care. Bye.